A pregnant woman in a $70 dress stands humiliated in a Hamptons mansion, while high society elites laugh at her expense. Her husband turns away, too cowardly to defend her. But the mocking stops dead when a twin-engine corporate helicopter shatters the garden party and Wall Street's most ruthless billionaire steps out. The rented Mercedes-Benz E-Class crawled along Meadow Lane in Southampton, its tires crunching softly against the crushed white gravel of the most expensive driveway on the East Coast. Inside the car, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Liam Harrington adjusted the bow tie of his rented Tom Ford tuxedo for the 5th time in 10 minutes. His palms were sweating, slipping against the leather steering wheel. He was 28, a senior analyst at the elite wealth management firm Whitman & Gray, and tonight was the single most important night of his professional life. The firm's managing partner, Richard van der Kamp, was hosting his annual midsummer gala. An invitation to the van der Kamp estate wasn't just a social courtesy. It was an audition. The partners were deciding who would be elevated to vice president by the 3rd quarter, and Liam was desperate for the promotion. Sitting in the passenger seat, 26-year-old Claire Harrington gently rubbed her swollen belly. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child. Unlike her frantic husband, Claire was the picture of calm, though a quiet weariness lingered in her green eyes. She wore a simple off-the-rack navy blue maternity dress she had purchased from Macy's for $68. It was tasteful and comfortable, paired with a pair of sensible flats. "Claire, please," Liam said, his voice tight with anxiety, as the massive French chateau-style mansion loomed into view. "Remember what we talked about. Richard is old money. His wife Beatrice is basically Hampton's royalty. They judge everything. Just try to blend in. Don't mention the public school you teach at, and for God's sake don't tell them we took a payment plan for the nursery furniture." Claire offered a soft, reassuring smile, though Liam's words stung a little more than usual. "I'll be on my best behavior, Liam. I'm just here to support you." What Liam didn't know, what he had never known in their 3 years of marriage, was that Claire wasn't exactly the middle-class public school teacher from Ohio he believed her to be. Claire was born Claire Mitchell. Her father was Arthur Mitchell, the fiercely private, notoriously ruthless founder and CEO of Mitchell Global Holdings, a private equity and logistics behemoth worth an estimated $40 billion. Claire grew up in penthouses on the Upper East Side, attended Swiss boarding schools, and had trust funds that generated more interest in a single day than Liam earned in a decade. But wealth had brought Claire nothing but isolation and betrayal. Her 20s had been plagued by social climbers, fake friends, and men who looked at her and only saw her father's portfolio. When she moved to Brooklyn and took a job as a second-grade teacher under her mother's maiden name, she had sworn off the high society life. Then she met Liam at a local coffee shop. He was ambitious, a little stressed, but he had looked at her with genuine affection. He fell in love with Claire, the teacher, the girl who drove a battered Honda Civic and clipped grocery coupons. She had meant to tell him the truth before the wedding. Then she meant to tell him before they bought their cramped 2-bedroom condo in Queens. Then she meant to tell him when she got pregnant. But the longer she waited, the harder it became. She loved their normal life, and she feared that knowing the truth would change Liam, warping him into the kind of money-obsessed sycophants she had fled. Tonight, however, the toxic world she had escaped was waiting for her on the other side of the wrought-iron gates. A valet in a crisp white uniform opened Claire's door. Liam handed over the keys, practically trembling as they walked up the grand limestone steps. The party had spilled out onto the sweeping, manicured lawns overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. A string quartet played Vivaldi on the terrace. Waiters in pristine white coats carried silver trays of beluga caviar and flutes of vintage Dom Perignon. "Harrington, glad you could make it," a booming, authoritative voice called out. Richard van der Kamp approached. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 50s, with silver hair and the kind of aggressive tan that only came from wintering in St. Bart's. Beside him was his wife, Beatrice. Beatrice was a terrifying vision of surgical perfection and inherited arrogance. She was draped in a custom emerald silk gown, a Cartier diamond necklace resting heavily on her collarbone. "Mr. van der Kamp, thank you so much for having us," Liam said, his voice pitching half an octave higher than normal. He instantly adopted a subservient, eager-to-please posture. "This is my wife, Claire." Claire extended her hand. "It's lovely to meet you both. Your home is beautiful." Richard gave Claire's hand a perfunctory, limp shake, barely looking at her. "Yes, well, it's one of the older properties on Meadow Lane. Been in Beatrice's family since the 20s. Beatrice, however, did look at Claire. Her icy blue eyes raked up and down Claire's figure, performing a silent, brutal appraisal. The corners of Beatrice's mouth tightened in a mockingly polite smile. She immediately recognized that Claire's dress didn't belong in this zip code. "How quaint," Beatrice purred, her voice dripping with venomous condescension. "Liam, you didn't mention your wife was expecting, or that she shops so pragmatically." Liam's face flushed deep red. "Oh, well, yes. We're expecting a boy in October. Claire is very practical." "Clearly," Beatrice said, taking a slow sip of her champagne. "Come, Richard. The ambassador just arrived. Do try to mingle, Liam. Just don't let your wife exhaust herself. I know how tiring it can be for the middle class to keep up with the evening." Before Liam could even process the insult, the Van der Kamps swept away. Claire felt a hot knot of anger form in her chest, not for herself, but for her husband, who was currently staring after his boss like a scolded puppy. "Liam, that was incredibly rude of her," Claire whispered. "Shh," Liam hissed, looking around frantically. "Don't cause a scene, Claire. That's just how Beatrice is. Please just go find a seat near the garden, and let me do some networking. I need this VP slot." Claire watched her husband hurry off toward a group of senior executives, leaving her entirely alone in a sea of strangers. She took a deep breath, resting her hand on her baby bump. For Liam, she told herself. Just endure it for Liam. By 10 o'clock, the party was in full swing, and Claire's feet were aching. She had spent the last 2 hours sitting quietly on a wrought-iron bench near the rose garden, sipping sparkling water, and watching the masters of the universe pat each other on the back. Every time she tried to join a conversation with the other wives, she was met with cold shoulders and polite, dismissive nods. She watched a group of women, led by Beatrice van der Kamp, holding court near the edge of the terrace. They were discussing their summer homes in Tuscany and complaining about their private chefs. Claire, feeling a sudden cramp in her lower back, decided she needed to use the restroom. To get to the main house, she had to walk directly past Beatrice's circle. As Claire approached, she tried to slip by unnoticed, but Beatrice's sharp eyes caught her. The older woman had consumed 3 glasses of champagne, and the alcohol had dissolved whatever thin veneer of manners she usually maintained. "Oh, look, girls, it's the little public school teacher," Beatrice announced loudly. The conversation among the women stopped, and a half-dozen pairs of eyes turned to Claire. "Leaving so soon, dear? Or are you just heading inside to steal some of the good hand towels?" A chorus of refined, cruel giggles erupted from the women. Caroline, the wife of a managing director, covered her mouth with a manicured hand. "Beatrice, behave. She's pregnant." "I am behaving," Beatrice laughed, stepping directly into Claire's path. "I'm just fascinated. Tell me, Claire, how do you manage? Liam is just an analyst. Barely makes mid-6 figures. And with a baby on the way, do you make your own baby clothes? I hear upcycling is very trendy among the poor. Claire stopped. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but the Mitchell family steel, the same unyielding iron that made her father a terror in the boardroom, straightened her spine. Liam works incredibly hard, Claire said, her voice steady and calm. And we have everything we need, Mrs. van der Kamp. Wealth doesn't define a family's happiness. Beatrice's eyes flashed with annoyance. She didn't like being spoken back to by someone she considered a peasant. How terribly poetic. But wealth does define whether you belong in this garden, sweetheart. At that moment, Liam, who had noticed the commotion, came rushing over with Richard trailing behind him. "Is everything all right here?" Liam asked, panting slightly, his eyes darting nervously between his wife and the boss's wife. "Oh, Liam, darling," Beatrice sighed theatrically. "Your wife was just lecturing us on the virtues of poverty. It's terribly depressing. Frankly, she's bringing the entire mood of the gala down. Her dress alone is an eyesore. Is it polyester? It looks flammable." Claire looked at Liam, expecting, waiting for him to step up, to take her arm, to tell Beatrice that she had crossed a line, to say that it was time for them to go home. He didn't even have to yell. He just had to stand by her. Instead, Liam let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "I apologize, Beatrice," Liam said, refusing to meet Claire's eyes. "Claire's hormones are a bit all over the place with the pregnancy. She doesn't know what she's saying. And well, you know how it is, we're just trying to be economical. She insisted on wearing that dress." Claire felt the air leave her lungs. The betrayal hit her harder than a physical blow. He threw her under the bus, for a job, for a pat on the head from a man who despised him. Beatrice smirked in triumph. Well, perhaps she needs a lesson in economics. As a waiter passed by, carrying a silver tray, loaded with glasses of full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon and plates of greasy bruschetta, Beatrice purposefully took a step back, feigning a stumble. She slammed her shoulder hard into the waiter's back. The waiter yelped, losing his balance. The tray tipped. Claire gasped as 3 glasses of dark red wine cascaded down the front of her navy dress, followed by a shower of olive oil and tomatoes. The cold, sticky liquid soaked instantly through the cheap fabric, clinging to her skin and outlining her pregnant stomach in a humiliating, dripping mess. The patio fell dead silent. "Oh dear," Beatrice cried out, raising her hands to her mouth in mock horror, though a vicious smile played on her lips. "I am so terribly clumsy, but really, given the quality of the garment, I think I may have actually improved it." The women around her burst into open, unapologetic laughter. Several guests pulled out their phones, snapping photos of the pathetic, wine-soaked pregnant woman standing on the patio. Claire stood, frozen, trembling violently. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She looked at Liam. Liam didn't hand her a napkin. He didn't take off his jacket to cover her. Instead, he spun around to face Beatrice. "Oh my God, Beatrice, are you okay? Did any of it get on your dress? I am so sorry about this clumsiness." Claire stared at the man she had married. In that single, crystal-clear moment, the illusion shattered. Liam wasn't the sweet, grounded man she thought he was. He was a coward, blinded by ambition, willing to watch his pregnant wife be publicly humiliated if it meant securing a promotion. "Liam," Claire whispered, her voice cracking. "Claire, just go to the laundry room or something." Liam hissed at her, his face contorted in embarrassment. "You're making a scene. Just go clean yourself up." Claire didn't say another word. The tears finally spilled over hot and bitter. She turned on her heel, ignoring the snickers and the pointed fingers, and walked away from the patio. She didn't go to the laundry room. She walked straight across the sprawling, perfectly manicured back lawn, away from the lights and the music toward the dark edge of the property that bordered the beach. The cool ocean wind hit her face as she stopped near a stone fountain. Her dress was ruined, sticking uncomfortably to her skin. Her heart was shattered. She had wanted so desperately to be normal. She had wanted Liam to be her safe harbor. But the normal world had just treated her like garbage, and her husband had handed them the trash bags. Claire reached into her small clutch purse. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She bypassed Liam's contact and scrolled to a number she hadn't dialed in nearly a year. A number saved simply as Dad Private. It rang only once, before a gruff, gravelly voice answered. "Claire Bear, it's late. Is everything all right with the baby?" Hearing her father's voice, the voice that could make Wall Street bankers sweat through their suits, but which only ever held absolute tenderness for her, broke the dam. A sob escaped her throat. "Dad!" Claire wept, clutching her stomach. There was a sudden, terrifying shift in the silence on the other end of the line. The warm father was gone. The billionaire titan was awake. "Who made you cry?" Arthur Mitchell demanded, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Where are you?" I'm at the Vander Camp estate in Southampton." Claire choked out, wiping her wine-stained face. "Dad, I need you to come pick me up. Right now. I want to go home." "I am at the East Hampton house. Do not move. Do not speak to anyone." "I am coming," Arthur said. The line went dead. Claire stood on the lawn, the Atlantic Ocean crashing behind her. She looked back at the glowing mansion where Beatrice was still holding court, and her husband was still begging for scraps. They thought she was a nobody. They thought she was powerless. They were about to find out exactly who they had messed with. Back on the sprawling terrace, the atmosphere had returned to a state of smug, wealthy tranquility. The string quartet had resumed playing, transitioning into a lively Mozart piece. Waiters rushed to mop up the spilled wine and sweep away the broken glass, ensuring no trace of Claire's humiliation remained to spoil the aesthetic of the evening. Liam stood in the center of the patio, holding a fresh glass of scotch, desperately attempting to smooth things over with his boss. "I really am so sorry about that, Richard," Liam said, forcing a self-deprecating chuckle. "Pregnancy hormones, you know, she's not used to this caliber of event. It won't happen again." Richard Vander Kamp swirled his drink, looking at Liam with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Look, Harrington, I appreciate your drive. Your quarterly projections on the tech sector were excellent. But to be a vice president at Whitman and Gray, you need to be a complete package. That includes having a wife who can host, who understands the nuances of our social circle. If you can't even manage your own household, how can I trust you to manage a $2 billion portfolio?" Liam swallowed hard, the taste of ash in his mouth. "I completely understand, sir. I'll handle it. Claire just needs some refinement." "See that you do," Beatrice chimed in, adjusting her Cartier necklace with a dismissive sniff. "I won't have my garden parties turned into a charity ward." Suddenly, the crystal chandeliers hanging beneath the patio awning began to tremble. It started as a low, rhythmic thumping, something felt in the chest before it was heard by the ears. The guests paused their conversations, looking up at the clear, star-studded sky. The sound grew louder, a heavy mechanical roar that drowned out the string quartet. "What on earth is that?" Beatrice demanded, clutching her husband's arm. Over the tree line, a massive matte black Sikorsky S-76D corporate helicopter roared into view. Its navigation lights blinked menacingly against the dark sky. This wasn't a standard polite news chopper. This was an executive military-grade machine, the kind utilized by heads of state and billionaires who operated above FAA noise ordinances. "He can't fly that low," Richard shouted over the deafening noise, shielding his eyes from the blinding glare of the chopper's searchlight, as it swept over the property. "Whose aircraft is that?" called the police. But the helicopter wasn't just flying low. It was descending. Panic erupted. The Sikorsky flared directly over Beatrice's prized imported Italian marble fountain and began to touch down in the center of the manicured back lawn. The twin engines screamed, generating hurricane-force downwash. It was absolute chaos. The pristine white catering tents violently collapsed. Silver trays holding thousands of dollars worth of beluga caviar and foie gras were whipped into the air like frisbees. Hundreds of crystal champagne flutes shattered against the limestone patio. Women in designer gowns shrieked as gale-force winds plastered them with dirt, uprooted grass, and crushed rose petals. Beatrice van der Kamp was knocked backward into a waiter, her custom emerald silk gown instantly soaked in a pitcher of iced water. Liam cowered behind a marble pillar, covering his head, as a decorative patio chair cartwheeled past him. With a heavy crunch that ruined $100,000 worth of landscaping, the helicopter landed. The engines whined as the rotors began to slow. The dust settled, revealing the sleek, intimidating machine resting like a massive bird of prey on the lawn. The side door slid open. Two men stepped out first, wearing tailored dark suits and earpieces ex-Secret Service private security. They flanked the door, scanning the terrified crowd of socialites. Then a third man descended the steps. Arthur Mitchell did not look like a man who attended garden parties. At 62, he possessed the broad-shouldered, imposing physique of a former boxer draped in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit. His silver hair was swept back, and his slate-grey eyes scanned the patio with the predatory coldness that had famously made veteran Wall Street CEOs weep in boardrooms. Richard van der Kamp, his silver hair blown into a frantic mess, stepped forward, his face purple with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard bellowed, marching toward the aircraft. "Are you insane? You are trespassing on private property. I will have you arrested. I will sue you for everything you—" Richard stopped dead in his tracks. He blinked, all the blood suddenly draining from his face, as his brain finally registered the face of the man standing before him. "Mr. Mitchell." Richard stammered, his voice suddenly sounding very small. Every senior partner at Whitman and Gray knew Arthur Mitchell. Mitchell Global Holdings controlled so much capital that they essentially dictated the weather on Wall Street. Whitman and Gray managed a fraction of Mitchell's secondary logistics portfolios, a contract that accounted for nearly 30% of Richard's annual revenue. Arthur, my God. Richard tried to pivot, pasting on a terrified, obsequious smile. I had no idea it was you. If you had called ahead, we would have cleared the helipad at the country club. What an unexpected honor to have you at my home." Arthur didn't even look at Richard. He didn't acknowledge the crowd of stunned, silent millionaires. His eyes swept the property, searching. "Where is she?" Arthur's voice was a low rumble that carried across the ruined lawn. From the shadows of the garden, past the destroyed catering tables, a figure emerged. The crowd parted as Claire walked forward. She was shivering her $68 maternity dress, still soaked in dark, sticky Cabernet Sauvignon and greasy olive oil. She looked entirely out of place among the elite, yet she walked with her head held high. Arthur's icy demeanor vanished the second he saw her. He bypassed Richard, completely striding across the lawn. The terrifying billionaire stripped off his expensive Brioni suit jacket and wrapped it gently around Claire's trembling shoulders, covering the horrific wine stains. "I've got you bare," Arthur whispered softly, pulling his daughter into a protective embrace, kissing the top of her head. "I'm right here." A collective gasp echoed across the patio. Liam stepped out from behind the marble pillar, his eyes wide, his jaw practically unhinged. He stared at his wife, his coupon-clipping, public school-teaching wife, being held by one of the richest men on the planet. "Mr. Mitchell." Richard stammered, his gaze darting frantically between Arthur and the wine-soaked woman. I don't understand. Who is this woman to you?" Arthur turned slowly. The tenderness he had just shown Claire evaporated, replaced by a terrifying, lethal calm. "This," Arthur said, his voice echoing like a judge's gavel, "is my daughter, Claire Mitchell." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the Atlantic waves crashing in the distance. Beatrice van der Kamp, who was currently dripping wet and clutching a ruined silk dress, let out a strangled, horrified squeak. She had just publicly tortured, humiliated, and assaulted the sole heiress to a $40 billion empire. But it was Liam's reaction that was the most catastrophic. His legs nearly gave out. His brain furiously calculated the reality of what was happening. His wife, his Claire. She wasn't a middle-class nobody. She was royalty, and in her darkest moment, when she had begged for his support, he had abandoned her to suck up to a man who was nothing but a peasant compared to her father. "Claire," Liam choked out, taking a shaky step forward. "Claire, baby, what is going on? Why didn't you tell me?" Claire turned to look at her husband. The love and warmth that had defined her gaze for 3 years was completely gone, replaced by a cold, hollow realization. "I wanted to be loved for me, Liam," Claire said, her voice steady. "I didn't want a man who only saw a dollar sign. Tonight I saw exactly who you are when you thought I had nothing to offer." Arthur's lethal gaze shifted to Liam, recognizing him instantly from the background checks he had run years ago. "So you're the husband, the one who stood by while my pregnant daughter was treated like trash." Liam held up his hands, sweating profusely. "Mr. Mitchell, sir, please. It was a misunderstanding. Beatrice spilled the wine by accident, and I was just trying to secure my promotion. I did it for our family." "Your family?" Arthur scoffed, a dark, humorless laugh escaping him. He turned his attention back to Richard. "Van der Kamp, your firm manages the Class B logistics funds for my holdings, correct?" Richard swallowed nervously, nodding. "Yes, Arthur. We've had a very lucrative partnership for—" "Not anymore," Arthur interrupted, his tone chillingly casual. "By 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, my lawyers will freeze every asset we have with Whitman and Gray. I am pulling the entire portfolio. Furthermore, I will personally ensure that no bank on the eastern seaboard extends you credit. You let your wife humiliate my daughter. By Friday you will be filing for bankruptcy, and this house will be in foreclosure." Richard let out a pathetic whimper, stumbling backward as if he had been physically struck. Beatrice burst into genuine hysterical tears. "As for you," Arthur turned back to Liam, stepping directly into his personal space. Liam shrank back, terrified. "You are a coward. You traded a diamond for a piece of garbage promotion that doesn't even exist anymore. If you ever come within 50 feet of my daughter or my grandchild, I will bury you so deep they won't even find your shadow." "Claire, please." Liam begged, tears streaming down his face as he reached out toward her. "I'm your husband. I love you. Don't do this." Claire looked at the man she had planned to spend her life with. She slowly reached down to her left hand. She slid the modest gold wedding band off her finger. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed the ring onto the crushed grass. "Have your lawyer call my father's team, Liam," Claire said coldly. "I'm filing for divorce." She turned her back on him, wrapping Arthur's massive coat tighter around herself, and walked toward the helicopter. Arthur followed closely behind his security detail, falling in line. They ascended the steps, and the heavy door slammed shut, sealing them inside. The twin engines roared back to life, washing the patio in another blinding storm of dust and debris. Liam fell to his knees on the ruined lawn, coughing in the dirt, clutching the cheap gold ring as the Sikorsky lifted off into the night sky. He sat in the darkness, surrounded by weeping socialites, and his ruined boss finally realizing that in his desperate greed for a seat at the table, he had just thrown away the entire kingdom. Sometimes the people who seem to have the least are hiding the most power. Claire learned that true wealth isn't about money. It's about having the courage to walk away from those who don't value you, even when it breaks your heart. What would you do if you were in Claire's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of ultimate karma, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more dramatic real-life stories.